morning. For those of you that were not here last year, Happy New Year. For those that weren't here last year, last week. That was this year still, right? Anyway, Happy New Year. In case I missed you, I didn't get to say it. You didn't hear me say it last week. I got to make sure you know that I said it to you, and I appreciate it, and I want you to know Happy New Year. And I do not need your Eagles hat up here right now. They're trying to make me, I don't know, not wear it. That would mess up my hair. But at least show it. But I just refuse to today. He does. And there was a rather inappropriate name that came up. It was Greasus. I won't tell you who said that, but maybe it was. At least I'm not sure. It could have been me. So it's not going to stick. Anyway, thank you for being here for week 2 of this wilderness series. I do want to take a minute to say two things. Two things. How grateful I am for the number of people that are involved in our services. Like, you look around and you might just see 4 or 5 people on a Sunday morning, but there are at least that many, and probably 2 to 3 times that are at work somewhere else behind the stage. So you see the group up here, which I'm always grateful for. They do a great job of bringing us and creating an atmosphere of worship, right? There you go. That you could have been a little more excited than that, right? Okay, that's a little better. And then, but also the people who we have volunteer each week to pray. That's something we send out, and we ask people if they'd like to come up and kind of pray. And to pray publicly is kind of a scary thing. I get that. I understand that, to kind of be up in front of everybody else. But the good thing about it is, if you'd ever like to do it, is if you say, "Hey, let us pray," as soon as you come up, then everybody's eyes are closed and nobody's looking at you. And that makes prayer a lot easier, I think. So if you would ever like to pray, let us know. Let me know, and I'll be glad to kind of put you on the rotation. We would love to hear your voice as you pray to your God, and the way that you could lead this church as well in that regard. So there's lots of things to do, and I'm grateful for all the stuff that goes on Sunday mornings to get us to this point. So I thought I had a few minutes extra when I'm looking at the clock, so I thought I could probably could add a little extra there. But we'll see on the back end if that really works out. So here we are, brand new series, brand new year, second week of this series from 2026. And every year, every kind of new year comes with expectations. We kind of have an idea of what what this year holds for us, where we hope to be. We hope for clarity, momentum, progress, to lose weight, to eat better, whatever it happens to be. We imagine just kind of everything's going to go the way we want it to go, open roads and green lights. But more often, what we end up with is, maybe for a week or two that works out really well, but somewhere around this week probably, the year kind of greets us with something else entirely. Something else kind of comes at us. It's uncertainty, it's delay. There are questions in life that we didn't expect to be asking, things we didn't want to have to ask with. In other words, what looked like a lot of promise ends up just kind of being a lot of wilderness, and kind of stuck, and kind of lost, and kind of wandering in the mess. And in the Bible, wilderness is never accidental. It is a repeated setting where God does intentional work. It's where comfort fades. It's where the things that we're sure of, we become less sure about. It's where self-reliance kind of gets exposed in our lives. It's where the distractions around us are removed. It's when our life is kind of reduced to the essentials. These are the things that are most important. And then it's the place in our life where God can really no longer be ignored. He kind of demands that we face him and make a decision about him one way or another. We will either decide to trust, or we will decide to kind of turn and go the other way. But the wilderness is also a place of transition. It separates us from what we used to be to what it is we're becoming. It's preparing us for what we're going to be. It's getting us ready. It's building the things in us to do the things that we've never done before, the things that we thought we maybe couldn't even do before. And that's why I think it feels disorienting. That's why we don't like the wilderness seasons, because we're not who we were, which we were really comfortable being, and we're not yet who we're supposed to be, which we don't know how to really kind of be and do that yet. And so in this middle, in these wilderness seasons, kind of where we can end up being, it kind of feels like we're not moving anywhere. We're just kind of stuck. We're just kind of sitting. It feels like survival. It feels like stalled. It feels like you're just kind of circling around the same mountain and not really going anywhere or doing anything. But Scripture, when you read through Scripture, when you see in the wilderness time and time again, it is not punishment. It is not a sign that you're failing. It is a sign that God is forming something in you, that he is turning you into something different from what you used to be. And that doesn't mean the wilderness is going to be easy, or even that it's going to be fun or enjoyable. It is going to feel harsh, But you have to remember that it is never meaningless. It is uncomfortable, yes, but it is purposeful. It presses us to exhibit levels of faith we didn't have before. It reveals what it is we really trust in. It exposes what it is we cling to when everything else is kind of stripped away and gone. And like it or not, and most of us probably are not, is God shapes people slowly. Formation happens in seasons and in stages, not in seconds. Faith isn't microwaved. Character isn't downloaded. And if it is downloaded, it's like dial-up, and it takes forever to get it in. Some of you don't know what dial-up is. Ask your parents, right? Calling is not rushed. So much of Scripture, when we read it over and over again throughout all of it, it is not dramatic breakthroughs. We see those, but that's not what we see all the time. What we see more often than not is just kind of learning to remain faithful while God quietly works in the places that you can't see. So when the days or the weeks or even the months of this year begin to feel unsettled, it doesn't mean that God is absent from your life. It doesn't mean that he doesn't care about you. It just means that he is working beneath the surface, that he is working in the space between what was and what will be. And that's exactly what we see in the story of David. Through this series, we're going to drop into 4 or 5 different moments of David's life and kind of see that how David progresses. But he promises him, he anoints him, he's going to be the king, but then he doesn't immediately become king. It's a dozen or more years later before that actually happens. And so before before God puts the crown on his head, I bring the water up here and I never drink it. And that's probably what I should on occasion. But before God puts the crown on his head, he lays his head down in the wilderness. He says, before you're ready for this, you're going to spend a lot of time out here. Before you get this, you're going to spend a lot of time out here getting ready for this. And then last week we saw that the wilderness was not a mistake or a delay in David's story. While David was running, while David is hiding, while David is waiting, God would be actively at work, shaping his character, deepening his trust, and then forming the relationships that would carry him through that moment and then throughout his life as king. What looked like isolation was actually preparation. What looks like he's all alone, all by himself, is God saying, I'm getting you ready for what's coming. And what felt like survival was I'm just running for my life, is God building and developing the leader that he needs to be. And so we pick the story back up in 1 Samuel chapter 23, verse 13. I'm going to have a little bit of it up on the screen. I will read some of it. I will paraphrase some of it, and some of it I will even leave out. We're not going to read the whole 15, 16, 17, 18 verses or something like that. But it begins in 1 Samuel chapter 23, verse 13. If you want to find it and read along, you can. I'm going to take the sip of this for a second. But if you want to find it, you can read along. If you don't want to find it, then you can follow it up there. So here's what's going on. David is once again on the move. That's kind of where he was last week. He's kind of constantly running. He's on the move. Once again, he's on the move. He has left Moab. He has returned to Judah, and he finds himself in Keilah. That's, I think, what it is. K-E-I-L-A-H, Keilah. I should have looked it up. Keilah, I think is what it is. The text, and when you read this text, when you read 23, 13 through 29, and I was going to read it, but I'm not going to read it. I don't want to take that kind of time. I took the time to recognize our worship team and so on and so forth. But when you read through this text, it's like boom, boom, boom. It's quick. It's kind of going very, 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 very quickly, almost breathlessly. God doesn't really take a pause in what he's saying, which you can understand that, right? He doesn't take a pause. David goes from place to place. He goes from decision to decision. He goes from threat to threat. There is no sense of anything going on in life where David gets to kind of settle in and calm down for a minute. When you're reading through all of this text, there's no pause. David says, hey, let me take a minute to kind of regroup and collect my thoughts. There is just constant moving. It's as life is happening to David faster than he can process it. And when you also read through this chapter, this 23:13 through 29, you'll see kind of what I had to struggle with throughout most of the week. I sit down, I kind of know where we're going plenty ahead of time. You can ask me about my sermon series writing later on. I'll tell you how early we are and so on and so forth. But I kind of know where I'm going from week to week and kind of know what the text is, have an idea in my head where I feel like God's leading us. And so I sit down on Sunday night and I kind of delete files and create new files and get ready for the week coming up. And I was reading through this and I read through it, Sunday night, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and I never could quite get settled. Every time I would read through this text, I would kind of come up with a different set of outlines. And then I would go like that, I don't really feel like that's what it's saying. And I would kind of come back the next day and I would go, and that's not quite it. And I would kind of write something else down. And I kind of did that for a couple of days. And it wasn't Friday. It wasn't until really Friday afternoon. It was somewhere around Friday morning, 10:30, 11 o'clock, that I kind of settled in on a different outline, kind of a different idea. I kind of felt like this is what God is kind of saying in this verse. Because it's kind of a weird section, 13 through 29. Well, when you read 13 through 29, there are no commands to obey. God's not saying, hey, do this in any part of this. There is no obvious sin that God is confronting in what's going on in David's life or anyone else's. There is no prayer that's kind of lifted up. You can kind of look at as the model for how we're supposed to pray. God doesn't even say anything in these handful of verses. He doesn't even speak. So if you're looking for a takeaway, the text doesn't seem to have one. It doesn't seem to be there. It's kind of a text that you might read and go, okay, well, that just gets us to the next thing. And there's a little, anecdote in here about Jonathan that's kind of cool. But other than that, it just kind of moves us to the next point. But maybe you can tell me at the end if I'm wrong. Tell me immediately. Let me get out of here and feel good about the day at least a little bit. You can tell me if I'm wrong, but maybe that's the point. Maybe that's the point of what this text is supposed to be. The message isn't found in what God says here. The message isn't in what David does or does not do. I think the message is in subtly what God does and does not allow to happen. When you read through this text, the worst possible case scenario never happens. It's really, really close. It's there right on the edge, but it never happens. When you read through this section, 13 through 29, God is absolutely quiet. But if you know where to look, if you're paying attention, then his hand is obvious. You can see he's doing something, and he's orchestrating what's happening. So beginning at verse 13, the sense is this. What's going on is this. There's two sections that are underlined. You can see it there. But David leaves Keilah with 600 men. Earlier he had 400. Now he's up to 600. And they have no clear destination. The text says what? The first thing is underlined there. It says that he was roaming the countryside. That's probably kind of hard to see, right? But he's roaming the countryside. That's not strategy. No one sets out. Maybe you do set out to go, I'm just going to kind of ride around for a little bit today. But no one sets out to just wander for a while. This is not strategy. What David is doing here, David is just surviving. That's all he's trying to do. He's just going from place to place. Let me just get around here. He doesn't want any order, doesn't want any kind of thing that can be followed or predicted in his plan. He's just kind of wandering around out in the countryside. And not strategy, it's survival. Even when Saul abandons the pursuit, even when it says that when Saul says he's not going to follow him anymore, David doesn't say, okay, well, now it's okay. Let me run back to safety. He kind of moves deeper into the wilderness. He doesn't say, let me get back to where I was safe. He presses on even a little bit farther. And that's when I think the pressure kind of really kind of settles in. This is where we get to verse 14. It kind of gives us the defining rhythm for this season. Saul hunted him day after day. That's kind of really what's going on. Saul hunted him day after day. Now, how often have you hunted for something? We've all hunted for maybe deer or elk or pheasant or whatever else, right? But more or less sales, right? I'm hunting for a pair of shoes that I might like every now and then or something like that. Or, hunting for my car keys, whatever, right? You get this hunt and you do it relentlessly until you find what it is you're doing for. You don't kind of give up and go, well, oh, well. You might kind of put it off to another day, but you don't give up. You kind of keep going. And so that's what Saul's doing. He's hunting him day after day. Saul is relentless in this. There are no breaks. There is no resolution. He doesn't find David, but he doesn't find David. And so there's no sense that this thing is almost over. Saul is just constantly doing it. And so what we get in this, what we see in this is not a single crisis moment for David. This is sustained pressure. This isn't like a one and done, and I got through this, phew. This is, oh man, it keeps coming. Life is just closing in on David. It's surrounding around him, and no matter where he goes, no matter what adjustments he makes, or no matter how he reacts, Saul is still coming. Saul is still coming after him. And I think when we read this text, when we kind of really understand it, I think it forces us to reconsider what God's faithfulness to looks like. Because he doesn't stop Saul from hunting David. Like, that's what we want. That would be resolution. Oh, well, God's just going to tell David or Saul to stop doing it, and Saul's going to stop doing it. That's what we want God to do. But that is not at all what God does. So I think we have to change what it is we think for resolution in our lives. He doesn't change David's hardship. He doesn't say, Saul, stop, that's enough. You're not going to do this anymore. He doesn't say, hey, David, why don't you go over here really, really far away where Saul will never go, and then you'll be fine. He doesn't do any of that stuff. He doesn't shorten the season, and then God doesn't even lean in and say, hey, here's why I'm doing what I'm doing. Like, you never get that. But then verse 14 kind of continues. It ended, and Saul hunted him day after day, but God didn't let Saul find him. I think there's the other part of that verse. There's the key. God didn't let Saul find him. Instead, what God did is he didn't stop Saul. He didn't move David out. He restrained the damage that Saul could do. Saul is persistent, but he is ineffective. Betrayal happens, but it is to no benefit. Danger closes in, but it never gets close, right? I could say that in 150 different ways, right? But you kind of get the idea. What God is doing here is almost this quiet underneath stuff. It is almost invisible. It probably is invisible when you first read through it, but it is constant, which teaches us, I think, that faith sometimes doesn't look heroic. Sometimes faith on our parts is just consistent. It's just showing up and exhibiting it again. Even when today doesn't look any different from yesterday, I still have faith today. Even when the next day doesn't look any different from the 2 days before, I just have faith again. It's taking the next step, at the same time refusing to become bitter or reckless or desperate. Right? That's what we typically tend to do when things don't come out quickly. We end up in one of those areas. God's presence in this passage, it doesn't show up as progress or resolution. It's not happening. This isn't finally getting dealt with. It shows up as restraint. He stops Saul from being able to get to him. Saul can get close. Saul can hunt all he wants to, but he is not going to get there. The pressure is still there, but its reach is limited. Saul advances, but he never quite gets there. It's as if God is sitting there and he draws a line. He says, you can come this far, but not this, but no farther than this. Right? You remember the cartoons? You step over this line, right? And then they'd step over it and they'd move it, right? Bugs Bunny, ask your parents, right? But that's like what God is saying. He says, you can come this far, but you're not going to come any farther. And so Saul hunted David day after day, but God didn't let Saul find him. And then we get this flip, we get this reversal, we get this really stark contrast in beginning in verse 15. David is still hiding in the wilderness of Ziph. He is near a place called Horesh, which means forest. And this is just kind of a reminder of where David is. It's not called forest because it's a wide open land. It's called forest because that's what it is. And David is kind of tucked away in this tangled mess. He's protected, but his kingship is not progressing. It's not moving in any way, shape, or form. And Saul is still on the move. The hunt is back on. Saul hunted for David day after day, but God didn't let Saul find him. But let me just remind you, David has done nothing wrong. This isn't David running from his sin. This isn't David hiding because, this isn't like David like Adam and Eve hiding because they've wronged and they're hiding from God, right? Like David has done nothing wrong. He hasn't stopped trusting God. Yet the season that he's in is still pressing down on him. He is not any closer to being king than he was when he first was anointed. He's probably farther from it. And there's no resolution. All he sees is just wilderness in front of him. Saul keeps hunting day after day, but God doesn't let him find him. God doesn't let him find him. And then verse 16 happens. Jonathan went to find David and encouraged him to stay strong in his faith in God. Verse 17, don't be afraid. Jonathan reassured him, my father will never find you. You are going to be king of Israel, and I will be next to you as my father Saul is where. David hunted, day after day, day after day. Saul hunted day after day, day after day, day after day. Could not find David. God kept him from finding him. But Jonathan just seems to find him. There is no explanation in the text. They're not telling us about messengers. There's nothing about they had secret signals, which they've had before. You're throwing up a sign or a flag, or there's a note on it. But there's none of this. There's no careful planning. There's none of that. All we're told is that Jonathan went to find David, and then apparently just does so with ease. So I think that says something to what God is allowing to happen. He will not allow Saul to find him, but he does let Jonathan kind of get through the barrier and find him. And then Jonathan comes not as a prince, because that's who he is. He's the prince. Saul's the king. Saul is his dad. Jonathan is the prince. He doesn't come asserting the authority of his father. He's not coming in offering David like strategy solutions, like here it is what you do. He is a friend sent at the moment when David needed it the most to show up and say, hey, stay strong in God. That's what he does. That's who he is. Stay strong in God. And that key, what he tells him, is really, really important to make sure we don't miss what it is. Jonathan does not strengthen David's courage. He doesn't say, David, you're a pretty mighty warrior. Remember when you killed Goliath? My dad is nowhere near as big as Goliath. He doesn't come and kind of do that. He doesn't kind of lean into his strategy and say, hey, why don't you do this instead over here? And you kind of flank him on the side. He doesn't come in and say, hey, here's what my dad's thinking when he's looking for you. Or here's where his plan is to kind of go look for you. He doesn't do any of that. He doesn't even kind of say, hey, this will all be over soon. Don't worry about it. None of that stuff is what comes out of Jonathan's mouth. What comes out of Jonathan's mouth is he strengthens David's faith in God. Remember I told you last week, maybe you don't, maybe you watched it, maybe you didn't, that your friends make a difference. The people you spend time with make a huge impact on your life, right? That comes up over and over and over and over and over again in the story of David. The people who he surrounds himself with make a difference in his life. Jonathan's a good one. We'll see some other ones later on, but it makes a difference. And so that's really key, what Jonathan comes up to say. And in fact, when Jonathan comes up, he doesn't even really say anything new. He gives David no new information about what's going on. He doesn't come in with going, hey, I learned this recently. All he does is shows up and tells David what he already knew. You're going to be the king of Israel. David already knew that. Jonathan has said nothing new. Jonathan has said nothing groundbreaking. Jonathan has said nothing that hey, thanks for this little bit of insight, this tidbit, I didn't know that. He has just reminded him of something that he already should have known. You're going to be the next king of Israel. Now, the next part is probably a little significant. He says, and I will be next to you. In that moment, Jonathan is the rival. He is the rightful heir to be the king. But he doesn't come in and say, hey, I'm next in line. Why don't you step aside and I'll let you be the highest that you could possibly be without being this. And so he doesn't just affirm David's future. He's just not saying, hey, you're going to be the king and I'm going to be next to you. He's kind of showing what it's going to cost him. He's saying that, hey, this promise is still intact. This promise that God gave you is still in place. And the one who can stand in your way, Jonathan, me, I won't do it. I will not stand in your way. Your path to kingship is wide open. Jonathan understands exactly what it is that David needs in this moment. Right? He knows exactly what it is that David needs. And so Jonathan, he doesn't come to fix David's situation. It's not what he's there to do. He comes to keep David from trying to fix it himself. That's what he's doing. He's reminding him, hey, remember who you are. Remember the promise that God has already given to you. You're going to be the next king of Israel. That's what he's coming to do. No new information. Just reminding him of what he's already done. He is not there to kind of get the king path back on track. He is there to strengthen the future king. That's what he's there to do. The call to action that Jonathan is giving him, he says, here's what you do. You just remain. You just kind of stay where you are. To lean into last week and to lean into the psalm we'll read again this week, this is what David describes it this way. Don't just stay hidden. Don't just stay out of sight. That's not what I mean by remaining, staying here. This is a good hiding place. Stay under God's wing. Stay under his protection. Stay under his guidance. Stay under God's wing. And then Jonathan gives him all this stuff, doesn't tell him anything new, just reminding him is what he should have known all along. David's clearly must have forgotten a little bit. He leaves. And that matters. That's really, really important to the story. Because for Jonathan to hang around would be a really good part of that. As Saul comes around the corner, Jonathan can go, wait, Dad, he's my friend. You can't do that, right? That's how it happens in the movie, right? You keep the hostage or whatever else, someone who can kind of speak for the person that's coming against you. But he doesn't do that. He doesn't stay in the wilderness with him. He doesn't remove the weight from him. He doesn't even stay there to help shoulder it. He shows up. He does the one thing that God said, this is what I want you to do. And then he leaves. And then he's gone. All that's left again is David by himself, other than the 600 whatever else, David, and then Saul hunting him. We're right back where we started. Nothing changed. The outside circumstances are exactly the same. Saul hunted David day after day, but God could not find him. We're right back at the same place. David is there. Saul is still hunting him. The wilderness hasn't changed, but David has. David is different now. David is renewed. David is encouraged. David is strengthened. David is steadied. David remembers. David is anchored. David is solidly hiding underneath the Lord's wing, protected and guided by him. And I think this is how God works in our lives more often than not. If you ask faithful believers who have done so for a while, this is how God works. He doesn't remove the weight. He doesn't give us these long-term answers and solutions. Sometimes he just kind of sustains us by putting the right people in our paths at the right moment, who can kind of show up and remind us who we are and whose we are. And that's of far greater value. Because most of us, we will have crisis moments. We will have, I don't know how I'm going to get through this thing that just happens. But for most of us, we're not in these moments of crisis. Nothing has exploded in front of us. We just kind of carry the same burdens day after day. We just kind of go through the same things, and they're constantly weighing on us day after day. And we're tired, right? The pressure is always there. I cannot get out from underneath it. The season that I'm going through never changes. We look forward to spring because we know it's just whatever, 60 days away or something like that. I don't know. We know the seasons will change. But these seasons that we go through, it doesn't seem to. We're just kind of stuck in this same thing over and over again. Relentless pressure on us. And we wonder, how long can we keep this up? How long am I going to be able to just do and sustain and hold up this thing that's constantly on me? And then this is what happens. This message arrives. And not a solution. We have those friends who want to give us advice. Here's what you do. Like, those are worthless. 10 times out of 10. Maybe 9 times out of 10, but probably 10 times out of 10. That's not what we need. What we need is presence. What we need is someone who says, hey, I was thinking about you. What we need was someone who says, hey, I was praying for you. What we need is someone who says, hey, you came to mind today, and I just wanted to check in. I don't know why. Just came to mind, and I wanted to check in. Nothing changes on the outside. All of the stuff, whatever it is you're going through, is still there. But the heaviness is a little bit lifted because you remember who you are, you remember what God has called you to, you remember who he is, you remember what he's constantly done. And then you feel strengthened. You feel better, right? You've gotten that text, that phone call, I guess is yes, the letter in the mail, whatever it happens to be. And then because of that, your spiraling stops. You don't quit what it is you were going through. You don't make a decision that you're later going to regret. You're encouraged. You're strengthened to kind of keep on keeping on. See, God doesn't always give us the strength to fight our way out. That's what we want. That's heroic. That's cool. God, give me the strength to battle through this thing and bloody some noses, and I'm going to get through it. And God doesn't always remove the pressure from us. I forgot about you. Sorry about that. Let me take that off. And he doesn't always give us these miraculous breakthroughs where we go, hey, God did this great thing in my life, and I don't know how it ended. It was coming at me, and it was beating me down, and all of a sudden it was just gone. I don't know what happened to it. It just was. I think what we see in this text, and I think what we see in other places, is that God's greatest act of faithfulness isn't removing the weight from our lives, but just saying, this isn't going to crush you. Like, that is a far greater value. This isn't going to kill you. This is actually going to make you stronger. This is going to form you into being. This pressure is going to turn you into being something greater than you thought you could be. And then sometimes it's just somebody who shows up at the right time with a simple, well-timed reminder, right? Not a powerful solution, which is what Jonathan does. Doesn't tell him anything new. Just reminds him who he is, where he's going to be, and then leaves. But Jonathan is not the only deliverance that David gets in these verses. If you fly down, I think we were in 16 or 17 or something like that. If we jump down to verse 26, we'll kind of see the kind of the rest of this story. 26, 27, 28, 29, the end of it. Saul and David find themselves on opposite sides of the same mountain. That's where they are. Saul and David find themselves on opposite sides of the same mountain. One's here, right? This is exactly, they could keep circling this forever, maybe, but that's probably not where this is going to go. This is going, hey, we're coming to a point where this is going to clash. This is getting ready to come together, right? The gap is closing, right? If you're watching this, the pressure is peaking. You can see Saul's coming over here. He has no idea. David's coming over here. He has no idea. And you're going, oh, David, turn around, or whatever like that, right? Like, you're into the story. David is out of the forest, which is where he was earlier, right? He was in the forest, but he is not out of the woods yet, right? The whole road just to get to that point. He is out of the forest, but he is not out of the woods yet. And then for the first time in this passage, you can see this coming. Saul's coming around this way, David's coming around. You kind of go, okay, there's no way out. This is going to result in a battle. Like, this is going to get solved one way or another. God has resolved nothing yet in this passage, and this has to be it. This has to be where it's all going to happen. Saul is close enough to taste the victory. David is running out of places to hide, and then without warning, just all of a sudden, just out of the blue, a messenger arrives and says to Saul, hey, the Philistines are attacking Israel. And so Saul, oh man, turns and goes the other way. What was like imminent danger is Saul now gone. And David just probably completely unaware. Right? I'm not going to skip. You got that last week. If you missed it, you got to go back and watch it again. But that's what's going on. It's coming. Nope. This is where he is. And what's really striking, Saul turns away, the pursuit is over, David is spared. What's really striking is just how understated this part is. Like you read through that and you don't pay any attention to it. We move right beyond it because it's a throwaway. I'm not trying to tell you parts of the Bible are throwaway. Don't hear what I'm not saying there, right? I'm not telling you pick and choose, but this seems inconsequential. There is no recorded prayer. There is no dramatic confrontation. There is no explanation from God. It doesn't say, but God delivered David by doing this. We don't get none of that. The deliverance doesn't come through David's strength or his strategy or his survival skills or how good he is at hide and seek. It comes through God leaning in saying, nope, that's far enough, Saul. Time for you to go do something else. This is as far as you're going to go. Now it's time for you to go do something else. And God rescues David by redirecting Saul. That's how he rescues him. I don't think David had any idea. I think if you look at other places in Scripture, we get this idea that God knows what you need before you have to ask, even before you know what it is. And the text doesn't treat this like a miracle. There's no celebration. There's no explanation of it. This isn't framed as some divine spectacle. It simply just happens. Saul gets a message and says, hey, they're attacking. Okay. God doesn't, but this interruption is the provision. This was God doing something in the midst of it all. God does not remove David from the danger. There's no warning like, hey, don't round that corner. Let's go back the other way. And if you walk at this pace, then you guys will circle the mountain forever. He doesn't do any of those things. He doesn't give David the ability to overpower Saul. He doesn't say, hey, when you come around this corner, you're going to see David, and I'm going to call Saul, and I'm going to come on you in a mighty way that you've never experienced, and you're going to annihilate his whole army by yourself, and your 600 guys are going to be like, what? Or he doesn't say that, hey, but when you get around the corner, there's just going to be a bunch of dead bodies. I took care of it. I handled it for you. Because it would be over. And God's not doing stuff with David just yet. And so he still needs the Saul hunting him daily. Because David's still going to grow in the next couple of, well, for us it's one. But in the next little bit of time, David's still going to grow. And so he rescues David by redirecting Saul. And so deliverance comes not through this mighty display, but a simple message on the other side that says, hey, you better come over here. And that's really, really important because that shows us, it teaches us something different about what deliverance looks like. God saves David, and it's not at all about David. David doesn't do anything. David doesn't speak. David doesn't fight. David doesn't even pray at the last moment. The rescue doesn't highlight his faith or his courage or his leadership or his fighting abilities or any of those types of things. It highlights God's sovereignty in every moment. God is the only person who's doing something in what's going on. David does not escape because he rises to the occasion. David gets away because God rises to the occasion. David doesn't survive because he depends on his friends or his instincts or his ability to stay hidden. He survives because he depends on God. David is not seeking friendship from Jonathan. He's not saying, hey, go send Jonathan to me. He's not saying, hey, here's what I'm going to do to get away from Saul. He's just doing what he does. And what he does is he seeks God. We know that because we see it in Psalm 63. Psalm 63 starts this way. A psalm of David when he was in the wilderness of Judah. That's where we are, in the wilderness of Judah. And I'll read it to you in just a minute, 11 verses. It doesn't take me that long. But what we'll see in this is we see this same pattern of what David is actually looking for. Not Jonathan, not safety from Saul, He's looking for God. And when you read Psalm 63, when you hear Psalm 63, it doesn't sound like someone who's in crisis mode. It's like someone who's carrying weight, who is exhausted, who's running on empty. Verse 1 says, "O God, you are my God. Earnestly I seek you. My soul thirsts for you. My flesh faints for you, as in a dry and weary land where there is no water." That faints is like, I'm just exhausted from doing the same things over and over again. Not I swooned once and I'm on the ground. Right? It's constantly under this pressure. I have zero energy left because I'm having to constantly hold up this thing. I'm having to constantly fight this battle that's coming against me. Day in and day out, it's the same thing over and over again. Right? We get that. And so what David is writing, what Psalm 63 is, what this story of Samuel 13 through 29 is, this is running towards God, not away from anything else. That's what David is doing. He'd much rather, let me chase after my God, than let me run from Saul. David is not asking God to fix the situation. He's asking God to, hey, help me, sustain me in the middle of it all. And when the weight is really on us, when we're really overwhelmed in the day-to-day, then that really gets exposed, what it is we're leaning on, what it is we're depending on, what it is we're hoping will come through. When you're spent and nothing is changing, it shows the rest of the world who you really are and who you're really leaning on. And this is where maturity begins to show in our lives. The wilderness teaches David to seek God, not seek relief, but just seek God. Not look for clarity, not look for salvation, but just look for God. And then when he does that, when he does the thing that he's supposed to do, when he just seeks after God, then God provides what David wasn't looking for. Jonathan shows up with a reminder. David is delivered from Saul twice in these couple of verses. And we've seen this idea before. Matthew 6:33, Jesus says, "This seek the kingdom of God above all else, live righteously, and he will give you everything you need." David seeks God, and then everything else just shows up when it needs to show up. David isn't like, "Hey, Jonathan, I could use a hand. Can you show up and help me?" David's like, "Hey, God, I need you." And all of a sudden, Jonathan walks. David's not, "Hey, he's coming around the mountain. How can I figure this out?" He's like, "Hey, God." And all of a sudden, Saul moves away. In the wilderness, in the time that you're going through, it's a mess. It's a pain. I know it. I get it. It's not fun. But God probably won't take the pressure away. But he will absolutely limit its power. I think that's the pattern of this text. The threat is there, the pressure is there, the weight is there, but it isn't the ultimate. It isn't the final say. The season continues. It absolutely will in your life, and it may for weeks or days or weeks or months or years. But it does not go ungoverned. God is not all of a sudden not sovereign in the moment. And for us, that should reframe what faithfulness looks like for us. It isn't always resolution. That's what we want, and I wish I could tell you that's what it is. Whatever you're facing, it's going to be resolved in 6 days. Right? We talked about if you're reading through Joshua, and they knew the end was coming on day 7. I only got to do this silly thing, walking around quietly for 6 days, and on the 7th day, it's all going to be done. They knew the end was coming. You don't know when the end is coming. And I wish I could tell you, hey, it's just right around the corner, just keep on. I can't tell you it's right around the corner, but I can tell you just keep on. That's what the text is teaching us. Sometimes faithfulness is endurance. Sometimes faithfulness is going to bed and going at night and going, man, I hope it's all better tomorrow, and getting up tomorrow and going, dang it, it's not. But also going, well, hold on, I'm still here. God is still mighty, and God is still active. So whatever this is doesn't really make a difference. God will not rush you through the wilderness, but he will absolutely preserve you through it. The worship team, you can come up. So when life feels stalled, when God is absent, when the weight remains, which is so many of us, God is not passive. He is present. He is restraining what's coming at you. Even though you think it has all the power and it's making all the decision, it's really not. It's an entirely different mindset shift that we go through. He is present in restraint. He is faithful in your preservation. And he is constantly just kind of drawing the line, saying, you can come this far, but no farther. You can do all of this, but you're not going to get this far. And there is something that we have that nothing outside can deal with. And that's where he's saying, nothing is changing. And that's where I want you to be in the wilderness you're in today. Even if you don't feel like God is doing something, even if you feel like it's just constant misery and overwhelming and overpowering, see it differently. That God has drawn the line, and he says, whatever you're going through, this is as far as it's going to get. It's farther than you want it to get. I can assure you that. It's a lot closer than you want it to be. But it is no closer than he has allowed it to get. And who knows what's going on the other side. To call it all the way. So here's what I want you to do as we pray. Maybe what you need to do is just thank God for his presence in whatever situation you're in. Maybe you can't see it. You don't recognize it. You don't see where he's involved in doing something in your life. You're just constantly like, God, I'm handling this all on my own. Where on earth are you? And maybe it's time for you to take a step back and God, you show me where you are. Show me the Jonathans that you have sent into my life. Show me the ways that you have pulled away Saul and I didn't even know that it was going on. Maybe ask God, stop asking God for the visible breakthrough, but maybe just say, hey, God, why don't you just be with me? And we can get through whatever's going on. Maybe you're a fixer. And you've tried to fix all of these problems on your own. Don't point, don't raise your hand. And now's the opportunity for you to go, you know what? I'm not going to try and fix this. I'm just going to do what David did, and I'm just going to find myself resting in your wings. And I'm going to let you do something about it. And maybe, just maybe, you're supposed to be a Jonathan to somebody else. Have you been through something? That was, you can raise your hands for. Right? You've been through something. Wasn't fun. But now you can go and encourage someone else and say, hey, you know what? I've been where you are. Now I'm where I am. Maybe you want to say it in a way that doesn't seem so cryptic. But you get what I'm trying to say. You are the person who can go in and say, hey, let me remind you of who you are and whose you are and what God and how God cares you and loves about you. God loves and cares about you. They knew that. But you being the reminder is of the utmost importance. So let's stand as we pray. Lord, just grateful for your love, your grace, your mercy. Lord, the way that you pour so much onto us each and every day. Lord, this text kind of reminds us and kind of shows us that you are working in our lives in ways that we don't even recognize. Lord, we don't get any indication that David cries out for Jonathan to show up. We don't get any indication that David knew Saul was just around the corner. But God, you knew what David needed. And so you sent Jonathan to encourage him. You sent the messenger. You sent the Philistines to attack Israel so that Saul could be pulled away. Lord, you can do these great and mighty things in our lives, and we don't often recognize it. Lord, help us to see them. Help us to not live life ungrateful for what you've done for us. But Lord, let us learn a little bit of humility to know that you are always present and active in our lives. That even though the weight isn't being lifted, you have limited how much it's going to impact us. And it might not feel like it in the middle of it. But Lord, this is more often than not how you deliver your people. Because you're not there to just be a genie in a bottle to get us out of our mess. Lord, what you're doing is forming us into who we need to be for later. Each of us is more than who we are. We are who you have called us to be. We are supposed to be who you have called us to be. And Lord, where I'm supposed to be is not where I am. But you're still working. You're still forming. The pressure, the wilderness, the pain. Lord, you're building me into who you need me to be. Lord, that reframes the misery for us. It helps us to see what you're doing in our lives. And the call to us then is to answer the question the way David did. It really comes into who are we depending on? Who are we looking forward to? What is it we're looking for in our lives? Deliverance, safety, encouragement, or you? The only one that's of value is to look for you. So Lord, in this moment, don't solve my problem. Don't show me the way out. Just show me you. So I want to finish Psalm 63 to you. Again, 11 verses, not that long. Oh God, you are my God. Earnestly I seek you. My soul thirsts for you. My flesh faints for you as in a dry and weary land where there is no water. So I have looked upon you in the sanctuary, beholding your power and glory, because your steadfast love is better than life. My lips will praise you. So I will bless you as long as I live. In your name I will lift up my hands. My soul will be satisfied as with fat and rich food, and my mouth will praise you with joyful lips. When I remember you upon my bed and meditate you on the watches of night, for you have been my help, and in the shadow of your wings I will sing for joy. My soul clings to you, your right hand upholds you. Man, I wish David ended it right there, but he doesn't, because David's just like us. David's no different. He's feeling pressures and stress and strain and everything coming against you, and David's still growing. And this is great, this is beautiful. I'm resting in you and who you are, and you're great, you're better than anything else around. You're seeing me through in mighty ways, and here's how David finishes. Because we're all being worked on. And David is still too. And this will open us up into next week. But those who seek to destroy my life shall go down into the depths of the earth. They shall be given over to the power of the sword. They shall be a portion for jackals. But the king shall rejoice in God. All who swear by him shall exult, for the mouths of liars will be stopped. Right? It was so great what you said earlier, David, and then we kind of turned a little corner here with this. But this is the wilderness. And it's not over. The wilderness is where God forms you. The wilderness shows you who you depend on. That's what this week shows us. The wilderness shows you who you depend on. Oh God, you are my God. Earnestly, I seek you. My soul thirsts for you. My flesh faints for you, as in a dry and weary land where there is no water. Let that be what carries you this week, what determines what you depend on in the wilderness and the difficulties of life. Have a great week. We'll see you next Sunday, on-site, online, 10 a.m. for the next part of David's life.